Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to find out who will also be heading on to the grand final. Top 4 starting tomorrow. These two competitors have been winning all the way through the upper bracket and are now one game away from guaranteed top 3 position. Let's bring them out. Our first competitor, a well-known streamer and a competitive top player in a variety of games. From Finland, let's welcome Savjz. Though Savjz is using the very common combination of mono white and Esper control, his Esper control list has a couple of unusual tech choices in them that have been bringing him a great deal of success. But Savjz's opponent, no easy match. He's going up against one of the top 5 Magic players in the entire world. From France, it's Gabriel Nassif. MTG Hall of Famer running Teamer Reclamation and Esper Acuity. There will be no mirror matches in this game. In this best of 3, we will now find out who will make it to the top 3 of the Mythic Invitational. Gentlemen, shake hands, good luck, have fun, and let's head into the match. Shake hands, damn it. Yes, excellent. Over to you, commentators.
Thank you, Day 9. Well, begrudging handshake there from our two competitors. You think that there's some bad blood there?
No,
there's not, is there?
These guys are friends. I think they were just having fun.
Let's take a look at the deck list here for Savjz. Esper Control, and Savjz has gone for the fairly standard combination of a hardcore control deck and a hardcore aggro deck. This is a control deck for here, Savjz.
Yeah, and we've seen his list before. He's played on camera here yesterday. It's pretty standard for Teferis. Only 1 Mastermind's acquisition. So not, we've seen some decks with 2, some decks with 4. He does have 2 Kaias, who has more threats main deck. Usual sideboard that we see for the Mastermind's acquisitions list. He's got a Mirari's Conjecture, so he can loop it, do it twice. Got something to cover all the bases.
And there's the mono white deck here from Savjz. Again, a fairly standard combination of cards that you see for this type of build. At this point, 3 Unbreakable Formation being one of the key cards here that we'll keep our eye on. On the other side of the table, though, it's Gabriel Nassif, and he's brought something a little different. He actually brought a copy of Teamer Reclamation. Not a lot of these floating around out in the field here, but Nassif has certainly made it work for him. We mentioned a minute ago, he hasn't lost in the tournament yet.
Yeah, this deck traditionally struggles with the small creature decks, specifically mono red, because it has the reach to burn it out. It does have a couple copies of Fiery Cannonade in the main deck, which are going to really help against the Esper aggro deck. The mono white aggro deck if he gets matched up against that deck. And it does have a good matchup against the Esper Control deck. So I think he's hoping that deck gets matched up against Esper Control, and his Esper Acuity deck, which we're going to see here shortly, gets matched up against mono white aggro.
Yeah, so here's the Esper Acuity deck that Nassif has brought. He's actually had quite a bit of success at the professional level with control decks. He likes to stream them as well. The blue-white decks are kind of his favorite. And this one, Dovin's Acuity, skewed towards the aggressive matchups.
Yeah, and I actually like something he's doing. He's playing a Nezahal main, which we've seen a lot of these control matchups end up like what we saw earlier just now with Strosky and Kowalski, where there's no win conditions and no one can damage each other. Having that Nezahal main, since there is no sideboarding, we have sideboards for Mastermind's acquisition, but there's no sideboarding, allows you to have a trump card in the main.
You can see that 1995 was the start there for Yellowhat. 77 Mythic Championships played, dwarfing the, 0 from Savjz. So he has been playing for a long time as well, since 1999.
Yeah, I think Savjz maybe didn't take it as seriously as Nassif did. I don't think you can see that, Nassif's been playing competitively since as long as I can remember.
Nassif doesn't really take anything that seriously.
I mean, look at that face in that picture. That's intimidation.
It is indeed. Yeah, it's actually hard to get a picture of Nassif when he's not smiling. He's really known for his big smile. He's actually been part of some of the biggest moments, biggest coverage moments in Magic history. He had the called shot Cruel Ultimatum. He had against Chapin.
The Chapin, the
Ignite Memories.
Ignite Memories.
You got to look that one up on YouTube, by the way, if you're new to Magic. Just type in Gabriel Nassif Ignite Memories, and you'll see one of the most crazy endings. But we're right here and right now, and let's take a look at how the decks played out. Because remember, the decks are chosen at random here in game number 1, and it looks like Savjz ended up pulling his mono white deck up against the Teamer deck. So how does that sit?
Sits in Savjz's, I wouldn't say his favor, but it's the matchup he wanted and not the one Nassif wanted. Like I said, this deck usually struggles. By this deck, I mean the Teamer Reclamation deck with fast creature decks. He doesn't have the reach to burn like a mono red deck, but Nassif's really going to want to draw his Fiery Cannonade and hope that the creatures haven't grown large enough where they're outside of the range of that card.
Yeah, there's a short window where that card can actually wipe away the board. out of this mono white deck. And on top of it, insult to injury here, Savjz wins the play as well. So he's really come up roses here. Steam Vents off the top means that he's going to get a few untapped lands going forward, though.
Yeah, being on the play, he's going to get to play a Tithe Taker on turn 2 if he wants, which really impedes Yellowhat's ability to function. If you look at that hand, a lot of those cards are reactive. You know, Sinister Sabotage you want to cast on your opponent's turn. Growth Spiral you can cast in the main, but it's the kind of card you want to pass, have the option to cast your Counterspell or cast Growth Spiral. He's going to have to play those in the main or have an extra mana if he wants to wait. Now, if you're waiting for Sinister Sabotage, you will have that mana, but it just really ties you up, Tithe Taker. It makes you have to play in a function, play in a way that you're not usually wanting to play in.
Yeah, he's got a Syncopate in his hand too, does Nassif. It's going to make that a lot worse. So it looks like, though, Savjz is going to take the very aggressive line here of playing the 2 1-drops rather than the Tithe Taker. He has 6 power on the battlefield, and it's turn 2.
Yeah, and he knows there's no 2-mana sweeper, so he can go ahead and get these guys out, and the Bodyguard protects one of them. Next turn, likely, if he draws a land, Snubhorn Sentry can outlive Fiery Cannonade. Tithe Taker makes a token if it lives through it. So I think he's fine to just develop his board and put pressure on Nassif.
Nassif already thinking about what his best option might be here. He had that Steam Vents off the top of the library, which means the Rootbound Crag or Hinterland Harbor will come into play untapped here, kind of unlocking some of the power of his hand.
Yeah, and he could play Search for Azcanta here, or he can pass and Growth Spiral and try to accelerate. I think he wants to accelerate, hoping he can draw into land and a Reclamation and get set up as fast as possible. This Tithe Taker is going to force his hand, though. It doesn't really matter too much. He can cast it after. He was casting it in instep or casting it now in response to Tithe Taker is the same thing.
Can he just Syncopate it? Is it worth
also
it?
Syncopate it.
Get rid of a Tithe Taker? Is that worth a Syncopate? Probably, but he does want to develop his mana and get those cards flowing if he can.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out well for him. Savjz didn't draw a 3rd land, or he wouldn't have the Syncopate option. So
here's 6 damage, though, coming through, and that's happening regardless. Sure, there's a few options here for Nassif, but nothing that really matters in the moment. Look at him think right now. Going through what kind of cards he might be able to find here.
Well, the reason he left Rootbound Crag in his hand is he can Growth Spiral into Shivan Fire.
Yeah. Put
the Rootbound Crag into play untapped and have a red mana. And look.
Oh, it's exactly what happened. He finds the Shivan Fire off the top of the library. Ooh.
So he was debating whether to hold up Syncopate or go for this play. He was rewarded.
Nice call there, partner.
I may or may not have played a few Reclamation decks, trying to qualify one of the top 8 Mythics.
You know, they call that play into your outs here, and that's exactly what Nassif does. He knows how many Shivan Fires he has. He tries to decide, well, is it worth it for me to keep up a card like Syncopate, or is it a situation such that I need to try to reduce the amount of damage that I'm taking at all costs, and that's what he's chosen to do. Did get fortunate and hit that,
I'm going to rewind here,
he's still behind.
That's why he was thinking so much about which 2nd land to play, because you want to make sure you leave, like had he played that Rootbound Crag, the land he puts into play would have been Hinterland Harbor, and he would have had a red mana available for the Shivan Fire. So little things like that you don't think matters, you just click, play one of your lands. Why does it matter? Because that's why.
Gabriel Nassif is in the Hall of Fame and has really one of the storied careers for Magic the Gathering going back to 1999.
A lot of options
that's
here.
Why.
Sorry to interrupt. There's just a lot of options here. And with the Tithe Taker, he kind of has to make these plays now if he wants to do it. Like, he could put the Breeding Pool into play untapped and play Growth Spiral and Search for Azcanta. Or if the Growth Spiral hits another land, put that into play and have Sinister Sabotage available, but he wouldn't be able to cast it because of the Tithe Taker. He could put if he wants to cast Sinister Sabotage on his opponent's turn, he'll have to play Breeding Pool and take 2. So see, with the Tithe Taker is totally changing his lines of play, making him play in a manner that you wouldn't normally play in.
Yeah, you can see that Unbreakable formation kind of looming in hand for Savjz as well. If he finds one more land, he can fire that off and get in for a ton of damage, really put the screws to Yellowhat here. And yeah, he is going to go ahead and go for Search for Azcanta plus Growth Spiral.
And he had to take 2 from his land, and
yep,
it's just, he could have taken 2 from the Steam Vents to leave 3 mana up and do something, but there's not much he can do for 3, so he's going to go ahead and play it tapped.
Yeah, Growth Spiral gives you an extra land drop for the turn, so he does still get to play the Steam Vents out of his hand for his natural land drop. He is up to 5 mana with a Search, so things are going well as far as that goes. But, oh, Legion's landing now for Savjz, a nice one, because he can transform that right away and get himself that 3rd mana.
Yeah, and he actually has the option if he wants. I mean, I don't think you want to do it. He's going to play the Snubhorn. He could Conclave Tribunal the Search, but I think with your opponent at 12, you just want to put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
Put them, give them 1 turn. Put them on dead next turn.
Yeah, and it's a really good position here for Savjz as well, because he can apply a ton of pressure down on the ground, and then next turn he will have the mana for Unbreakable Formation either way, and he can force Nassif to respect that. But the truth is that Nassif is taking so much damage on the ground.
Doesn't even need it.
He's gonna have to do something about one of these creatures anyway.
Yeah, and he's a little resilient to Fiery Candidate here. The Dauntless Bodyguard's protecting a creature. The Tide Taker leaves a creature behind. The Snowburn Sentry, even though it won't attack for a while, still lives. He's flipped Legion's Landing into a Danto the First Fort to make more threats for the future.
Yeah, this one's looking really bad for Gabe Nassif here. He just doesn't have the tools to get the job done. 2 reactive spells, card draw spell,
yeah,
and a land ain't gonna do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's actually just over.
It's just done.
He could Chemist's Insight for a Shivan Fire and remove one of the creatures, the Aspirant, but the Unbreakable Formation will then be cast, make the creatures large enough, and he will be able to attack for lethal. This is what I mean about this deck not matching up well against small aggro creature decks. If you notice, he was just under constant pressure, and he wasn't able to develop his board because he was having to respond to threats. This Timor Reclamation deck really preys on slower control decks.
Yeah, where you have the time to fire off those growth spirals, to fire off these Chemisters Insights. Instead, boy, Tithe Taker really the MVP here, just forcing Nassif to take some lines he didn't really want to take.
Having to take damage from his lands,
Yeah.
to cast his spells. It was a really bad spot.
He's deciding what mana he wants to use for this Chemister's Insight. And yes, this is the level of depth that professional players go to make sure that they're playing as tight as possible, give themselves the most possible equity in the game. Not a lot to be gained here, though, unfortunately, for Yellowhat, as Savjz has really kind of flooded the board. And Savjz, you see a fist pump from him there. He knows that if this is what Yellowhat is doing, he is in a commanding position to win this game, and he looks like he's got game 1 locked up here. Savjz says, yeah, I got this one, gives a thumbs up to the camera there, because he is 1 game away from advancing to the top 4. All he has to do is turn his creature sideways here, and that's Unbreakable Formation to send a real strong message to Nassif. Hey, this is not going to be easy.
Yeah, so
boom, boom, boom,
since this one's
boom,
over,
and boom.
If you like that Chemister's Insight Nassif played, you can get that right now this weekend in the Treasure Constructed event. You get 5 wins before 2. You get a
You shouldn't have told me that.
Chemister's Insight.
I might need to do that now. I'm supposed to be doing my job here.
Who are we kidding? That's what you're doing right now. That's how I know. Looking at your screen.
All right, so that brings us to a game number 2. Now, when it comes to game number 2, things are set in stone. Whoever went first is going to go second. So in this case, it's going to be Nassif on the play, and we're going to switch decks. So whatever you played, you're going to play the other decks. A little bit of a different take here if you're used to, Mythic Championship or Grand Prix coverage. This is duo standard, and it's played out a little bit differently. So what does the matchup end up being here now in game number 2?
We've got 2 Esper decks matching up, but they're a little bit different. We've got Esper Acuity in Nassif's hands and Esper Control and Savjz. Esper Control, as we saw the list earlier, it's pretty standard. He's got an extra Kaya, 1 Mastermind's Acquisition. Whereas in Nassif's deck, he has 3 Mastermind's Acquisition. He doesn't have Teferi. Instead, he's opted for Dovin's Acuity. And it plays a little differently. It has, I think, maybe a better matchup against the creatures deck with the Dovin's Acuity to gain life. But he's got some tools in there, like I mentioned, that Nezahul main, things like that, where he's set up well for the mirror also. And
yeah,
as you say, he hasn't lost yet. And with Esper Control being such a popular deck, I imagine he's done some work to Esper Control decks this weekend.
So the randomness here of the deck choices not panning out in Nassif's favor there for game number 1. He really did want to see the matchup flip there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's one of the best control players around. Like
he just knows he's got to focus. He's got to win this one and not worry about the 3rd one yet. Just focus on the game at hand.
And it looks like we're going to get underway here in this control mirror. This is Savjz's opener. And how does it look here, David?
Real solid. He's got an Absorb. He's got a turn 2 Thought Erasure. He's got Teferi. And Vraska's Contempt doesn't do anything in this matchup. There's no planeswalkers or creatures to exile, so he does have one of his dead cards, and that's kind of the key to winning these Esper Mirrors in best of 1 is to draw draw less dead cards than your opponent. So, but like I said, Nassif, right? Tea's Wrath also dead. Revitalize doesn't really do much. I mean, it cycles, so it's not that bad, but and it does bounce a Dovin's Acuity, which I think we're going to see him hold it for. He might cycle it by casting it and drawing a card now, but I think he might want to wait for Dovin's Acuity later.
Yeah, cycling are cards that replace themselves. You can pay some type of cost, and then it'll replace itself, and that will happen here. Though, as you mentioned, Gabe really not in a hurry, and he can just sit on that Revitalize, play out Dovin's Acuity, and get an extra card out of it later if you'd like.
Yeah, and Thought Eraser takes the Dovin's
That
Acuity.
plant's going to go away here. Yeah, Savjz says, all right, I'm going to take your card advantage engine away.
I feel like what always happens here is you take the card advantage engine, they draw a card, and they draw another one. Like I wouldn't be shocked right here. You cast Revitalize, draw phase, and just cast turn 3 Dovin's
Guarantee.
Acuity.
Literally
It's like every time my opponents do that.
Yeah, the question is, how does Savjz react to the guaranteed top decked Dovin's Acuity here? We're locking it in.
He's going to put his own Absorb in the graveyard with his Surveil ability.
Okay, here it is. Oh, he didn't draw one. I don't understand.
Yeah, it doesn't work, but Thought Eraser is a pretty solid draw here. You can Thought Eraser your opponent right back. There's not a lot of 3-mana threats Savjz could play. I mean, he could play Kea, which is a pretty annoying threat for Nassif, but that's about it. And if he has one in hand, you can take it with the Thought Eraser. So,
in the meantime, he would have to choose between Teferi and Absorb as the relevant spells. One thing for those of you that are new to watching this level of play as well, Nassif takes his time. He's a very deliberate player.
yes, he is.
He is going to need to find a black mana source here, though, on the battlefield. There we go.
Go ahead and cast Thought Eraser.
So let's see what he wants to take here.
I imagine he takes it to Teferi. I mean,
He just doesn't have anything he wants to resolve in the
yeah,
near
you're not
future.
fighting over anything right now. Absorb, while important when you get into a counter battle, is pretty expensive at an awkward cost. You'd much rather your cheap counters like Negate and such, but nope, he's going to take the Absorb.
And look at that, he gets a Kaya's Wrath into the graveyard as well, so a potentially dead draw that he's been able to take out. Yeah, he does have the Absorb for Teferi, so it's going to be a long time before Savjz can realistically cast it, but look at that, search for his Canta.
Yeah,
off the
brutal
top.
top deck here. I mean, usually in these control matchups, the guy who searched for his Canta flips has a huge advantage, being able to search for a non-land card every turn. And that one wasn't available for the Thought Eraser, so for your opponent to draw and cast that, it's pretty brutal. In addition to, while building up to the flip, they get to just filter their draws, get rid of the dead cards, find the cards that matter, find land to make land drops.
Savjz is taking a look at the cards with search for his Canta and
Thought Eraser to the bin.
wow.
Thought Eraser's a really solid one here. So the reason he's casting this Kaya's Wrath and the reason he put Thought Eraser in the sideboard is he's trying to hurry up and flip this search for his Canta. So by putting a card in the yard, the Thought Eraser, that puts him one step closer. He knows there's no 5-mana spell Nassif can cast that he needs to counter. So he's basically discarding Kaya's Wrath and tapping out. And look, he wasn't punished by it. He tapped out and nothing happened.
Nothing happened at all.
And now his search is 2 cards closer to flipping. Very heads-up play you don't see a lot of players make.
Yeah, really smart. Gabriel Nassif has 2 copies of Mortify in his deck, one of which could take out search for his Canta, but once it's transformed, too late.
He's trying to get there before he finds the Mortify.
Another Absorb off the top of the library, so a pair of Absorbs and a pair of Kaya's Wrath here for Nassif, but
wow.
That ain't it. And look at that, the turbo flip there from Savjz, really heads up play from him.
And the beauty of that is the card you flipped it with was Chemister's Insight, which allows you to use this Vraska's Contempt to draw 2 cards, but with Jumpstart ability.
Ooh, here we go. Mastermind's acquisition off the top of the library, though, for Nassif. He is a mana short from being able to protect it with Absorb, however, so maybe he'll want to wait a little bit on this. What does he know about the hand? He knows, oh, there's only 1 unknown card in hand now for Savjz, so maybe he just fires it off.
Except he has 7 mana in the search for, Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, so he can tap 3 lands in the Azcanta, possibly find a counterspell, and he'll have 3 mana left over to cast it. So
that's a great point,
he's got
David.
kind of an unknown card.
Yeah, 1 more mana here for Yellowhat would be really nice, as he could protect his Mastermind's acquisition with an Absorb, but he doesn't have it right now, and you can see he's gone deep in the tank here, trying to figure out what the best line of play is.
Yeah, he knows about the Teferi, and he knows if he casts Mastermind's acquisition, the shields are down, and Savjz will be able to just resolve a Teferi no problem. One of the things he could get, I know, I was going to say he could get Unmoored Ego, but even so, once he gets that, because next turn he'd have 6 mana for sure, the Teferi would already be in play, and you got to deal with that one in play. So
you can see Gabriel's really pained here about this decision. You saw him just sort of shake his head.
He could get a Thought Eraser out of his deck and take this Teferi out of his opponent's hand, but that doesn't really get you anywhere. Like, your opponent still has a flip Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. I mean, like we've talked about, I really think these decks with Mastermind's acquisition should have had a Field of Ruin in the sideboard.
Yeah, that's right. We've been talking about that all weekend. Look at this. As Canto the Sunken Ruin gets activated, it was Syncopate that he found. Does he have enough mana to actually counter here?
He can Syncopate for 2, but Nassif has 2 mana left over.
So not quite. He did find a counter spell, but it was not the right one. And that means that Mastermind's acquisition is resolving. And what we're watching right now is Gabriel Nassif searching through his sideboard.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm a big proponent of when you cast a tutor, a card that searches your deck, your library, wherever, your sideboard. I like to have in my head a plan of what I'm going to get. Because right now, say he looks at these cards and decides, actually, this is not my best play, you can't take that back. So it's usually a good idea before you cast your searching card to have a firm grip on exactly what you're going to take. Now, then there's nothing wrong with kind of looking over to make sure, but these players have their deck list. This is Nassif's deck. He should know his sideboard already.
Yeah, this is a good one here. He took Sorcerer's Spyglass, but he does not cast it this turn. He says, you know what? If you want to tap out and play a Teferi, you get the card back off of it, fine. I can play Sorcerer's Spyglass next turn, and I'll have Absorb at the ready.
Right. Well,
heads up play.
Yeah, I mean, he also knew about the Syncopate because you have to reveal it with the Sunken Ruin.
Indeed.
So he knew tapping out his opponent would just tap 2 mana.
Yeah.
Now he gets to have sort of a counter war to resolve the Spyglass, which would shut off this Teferi and all future Teferis.
And another Mastermind's acquisition here off the top of the library for Nassif.
Yeah, I don't
he
think
is finding his haymakers, but is the turn right now for the Spyglass?
Yeah, I think the Spyglass, because again, with the acquisition, you're only going to have 2 mana left over, nothing you can really do. He can save that for later. What he really wants is some lands. Like I mentioned before, in these control matchups, land drops are key because they allow you to cast multiple spells in a turn. They allow you to get into counterspell wars. Right now, he's really kind of bottlenecked on 6 mana. He can't do some things and protect it and do other things.
Well, he's going to pick a fight here with his Sorcerer's Spyglass. Savjz is going to take a look at his options.
Yeah, he knows that if he syncopates for 4, Nassif can just pay.
Yep.
You know, if he had something he wanted to resolve next turn, he could just bait him and syncopate for 4, have him tap out and resolve it, but there's nothing he wants to resolve. Vraska's Contempt is nothing. Chemist's Insight is just 2 more cards, and you'd rather actually search for activate as Canto the Sunken Ruin at any time instead of drawing 2 random ones. So he's going to name Teferi. Pretty much the only choice.
Could he name as Canto the Sunken Ruin?
It does say, actually,
I mean, I know he can, I'm just saying, should he?
He could. You're right, 100% right. It doesn't say non-land on it like some of these cards do in Magic's history.
Yeah, if it's a mana ability, you can't stop it. But the question is, what's the more pressing issue here? Because there's 2 things fighting for his attention.
But here's the thing, right? You say as Canto the Sunken Ruin, right?
Yeah.
You say that, you pass. Your opponent just goes Teferi -3, put that under your third card from the top of your deck, and keeps on trucking. So it doesn't do much. It makes him minus his Teferi for 1 turn.
That's what he did. He named as Canto the Sunken Ruin here, and he's going to pass the turn back.
And also based on the way the spell works, if he didn't respond to him resolving the Sorcerer's Spyglass, there's no way to respond between naming it. So he did shut off his Sunken Ruin for this turn. But Savjz can then just cast his Chemist's Insight.
Yeah, he had a backup play that was perfectly reasonable here as well. Chemist's Insight drawing 2 cards, although it looks like there's going to be a little bit of a fight here as Nassif is trying to keep Savjz from going off here and drawing too many cards, though an active Teferi, pretty nice. And look at that, Mastermind's acquisition was draw there for Savjz as well.
Wow, yeah, and with
he could
the
go
amount
find
of mana
something
he has,
really nasty here.
He's got 4 mana left over after it. He can, I'm looking at his sideboard here, he can get Unmoored Ego if he wants. He could get, let's see here.
I think he'll have an extra land drop here as well, so he could have 5 mana.
He could have 5 mana. He can get Mirari Conjecture and just cast it and get it back.
Yeah.
And get back and absorb, and then the following turn get it back. So
that's tempting.
That play. It doesn't have, I'm looking for artifact removal. He has Cleansing Nova, but that costs 5. He could get Cleansing Nova if he wanted, but that's a little bit expensive. Get Ixalan's Binding.
Maybe we could take a look at Savjz's view here and get an idea for what he's looking at and what his options are. He's looking at Devious Cover-Up. That's what he took. So he's just looking for the insurance plan here.
I like it. More control. It also allows him to put his 1 Mastermind's acquisition back in his deck if he wants it to draw it later.
Finally, a land off the top here for Nassif, but boy, does he have his hands full.
Yeah, I think if he cast Unmoored Ego on Mastermind's acquisition, he leaves Nassif with not a lot of options. I mean, Nezahal is pretty much all you have to worry about, and you've got Chaos Wrath for that and some counters. That might have done it.
That is kind of the name of the game here in these control mirrors, is reducing the opponent's deck down to relevant cards, because there's so many that aren't. So many that just don't matter. The counter spells matter, the ways to interact with their hand matter, and then the Mastermind's acquisitions, Teferis, the things that you can actually use to either get things to win the game or win the game with are the only thing left.
I'm looking at Nassif's deck list. If you take the Mastermind's acquisitions out, that one Nezahal is it.
That's it, right?
That's it.
Like I'm gonna go through this, and you at home, you tell me what the cards that actually matter. Absorb, that doesn't win you the game. Chemist's Insight doesn't. Cry the Carnarium, Dovin's Acuity does not. Lands, of course, aren't going to get it done. Kaya's Wrath, no. Acquisition, that gets you other things, right? So you're saying let's just zip those right off of the list here. Moment of Craving, Mortify, Revitalize, Swamp, Thought Erasures, Vraska's Contempt, Search for Iskanta, and as you said, one copy of Nezahal Primal Tide. If you get those cards out of his hand, library, graveyard, etc., that's all he has left.
And then if all you have to deal with is that, then you just got to get you a handful of counter spells. Find you a Vraska's Contempt or a Kaya's Wrath. Now, he could discard 3 cards to keep it alive, but eventually he's going to run out of cards. Tuck it with Teferi. I mean, you can fight that with one threat. But he's going to Devious Cover Up, Gabe's Mastermind Acquisition, cast Counterspell back, shuffle all those cards back in. Gabe's down to just a pair of dead cards.
Things looking very bad for Yellowhat here, and you can see it on his face. He's like, ooh, this is not going well at all.
And Savjz just doesn't care about that Spyglass. He could have tucked it with Teferi, but he just wants to get to that emblem.
Yeah, he's just ignoring it. He says, fine, no problem. I'm not even going to bother.
Marching towards it. 2 turns from now, he'll have the emblem. Once you have the emblem, you can just exile that Spyglass if you want. And then you can go to work on our man's lands.
That's right. And you know what? Nassif having stumbled a little bit on lands throughout the course of this game means that he could put this game away in short order. And if he does, that will be Savjz advancing to the top 4. Also, he would be the only person to have beaten Nassif in this entire tournament thus far. Good news for Nassif fans, though. He would not be out.
No, he's got one more win in it. He doesn't even have to go on a long bracket. He gets this. If you go 2-0, you get 2 winning ends. You get your first shot, which it looks like Savjz is going to take. And then you get one more next round. Not next round for us, but next round for you. You have to wait for people to get there from the lower bracket.
Yep.
And you get one more shot at it. So
another blank off the top, and it looks like Nassif is going to pack it in. He says, good game to Savjz and concedes. Congratulations to Savjz. You are in the top 4 here at the Mythic Invitational. What a run by Savjz. And look at him. He says, I can't believe I did it. We even get a big smile out of him there as well. So fantastic performance by Savjz thus far. And another highlight on his reel here, defeating the Hall of Famer Gabriel Nassif. And 2-0 there, David. Just boom, bang, bang, and he is out of here. So fantastic stuff from Savjz. Really impressive play by him over the course of the weekend. Every time we talk to him after, he says, yeah, he's like, I didn't play quite as well as I really wanted to, which I'll tell you what, that is the mark of a very good player. Every player that says that after a win, they're on a good path. And I'll tell you what, the pathway for him looks really clear because he's in the top 4.
He hasn't lost a game today, I think. I think it's 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, 6-0 today.
He must be hungry. He just wants to get to lunch. It's easy mode, right?
He gets to join Pyotr Golgowski as the two of the 4.
That's
right.
Of
our top 4.
That's right. We've got half of our final 4 all set. Those 2 players, Pyotr Golgowski and now Savjz, are the ones who are in, and we are filling out those slots quickly here for the Mythic Invitational. Powered by Owned by HP. Thanks so much for coming along. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's David Williams, and we've got Becca Scott with Savjz right now.